This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. I am a textbook Libra. I am constantly seeking balance, not only for myself, but seemingly for the world. My life began quite Libra. I was born on October 12th or 13th, depending on where you look on my birth certificate. I was born to Hazel Dean and Roger Moss Sr. My parents didn't raise us to be black children. In fact, the only time I remember my parents talking about race was my freshman year of college. I went to a Christian college. My roommate's father, an Iowa Baptist minister, didn't know there were Baptists in Iowa. I'm glad you got that. I thought they were all Lutheran, but anyway. Did not want him rooming with a black person. And even then, their response was they were more upset because I had to be moved to a different room. Roger Sr. and Hazel Dean Moss did everything to give us the most normal life. During the years of Jim Crow, my parents shielded us with creativity. I remember our trips from Chattanooga to Alabama to my grandmother's house. We would leave early in the morning with a packed lunch and instructions that we would not be stopping to use the bathroom. Then we would leave my grandmother's house early enough to arrive home just before dark. My parents had a household principle. The principle in our house was, you are a Moss and you are a Pearson. Now, being a Moss meant you were well-spoken, had impeccable manners, you were respectful to all adults, and you were comfortable and confident in any situation. Now understand, I attended all-black grade school. In my all-black grade school, we were taught to diagram sentences and the necessity of proper grammar. We learned about Beethoven and Handel, Paul Laurence Dunbar, James Weldon Johnson. We learned about Leontine Price, the essayist Carl Rowan. I even got to meet him. And the tenor Roland Hayes, who was from my hometown. Later on, this would put me in a Libra crisis. Because outside of my home, I was reminded that I was black. In our home, it didn't matter. Because in addition to being a Moss, you were a Pearson. Now, if you're a Pearson, you're well educated. My grandmother was one of the only people in her small town in Alabama that could read. Her literacy was her power. She ran that town. Later on, I was at the first class of a desegregated high school. This was a major crisis. It was in the 70s. It was the beginning of the Black Power movement and race riots. And I remember hearing for the first time 2 words, nigger and Oreo. Now, being the Moss and Pearson that I was, I entered that school determined to conquer. I joined the Key Club and became its first black officer. I joined the choir and made All-State. To the racist whites, I was an uppity nigger. To the racist blacks, I was an Oreo. This Libra couldn't catch a break. My parents started a church, and my mother became quite famous in evangelical circles in my hometown. A lot of times, we would be the only black people at banquets. I remember sitting in awe watching my mother navigate those rooms with such confidence. That's what she taught us. My parents were determined that we would attend colleges where we would get to meet all kinds of people. My parents reasoned that you can't hate people that you live with, laugh with, cry with, sometimes argue with. Hate is reserved for strangers and categories. My best friend and I have had some amazing arguments. He's much younger than I am. One recent argument started with him saying, "I am so tired of talking about what happened 100 years ago." Being his best friend, I had to look at him, understanding that he had gone through schools where he hadn't gotten all of the history, and explain to him that his best friend, in his best friend's lifetime, his best friend's parents couldn't vote. His best friend had friends whose houses were burned because they moved into the wrong neighborhood. His best friend was called that name that he doesn't understand is so offensive because, well, black people use it. A few minutes later, he walked over and we hugged, and I knew he understood. You see, in the 70s and 80s, we did this artificial thing. We started creating these racial identifiers. All of a sudden, there was a black way to speak. There was a black way to sing. There was a black way to dress. There was a black way of politics. We got caught up on stereotypes and caricatures because, as my father would say, "That's easy, son. Right is hard." Our media got caught up in it. Even BET, the network that is supposed to show all the hues and all the different facets of Black America, only shows one segment. They take the easy way. We live in a new day of media, and we can write a new story. We live in the times of blogs and websites, Twitter, Instagram. And if you're looking for content, I've got some for you. I want you to shine the light. I want you to shine the light on that 5th grade girl who comes to school every day in a clean uniform, does all of her homework, and is making great grades. And Child Services comes to the school one day and informs the school that this child has been living in an apartment for 2 weeks on her own because her mother's on the run from the law. And when they ask her, "Why didn't you tell anyone?" her response was, "I didn't want them to take me out of this school." I want you to shine the light on those parents at those problem schools who, despite everything, are succeeding and thriving. I want you to shine the light on the PhD at a Tony private school on the other side of the country, moves across country to teach at a Title I charter school. And if it's athletics, I want you to shine the light on my cousin, the first Black professional triathlete. And finally, I want you to shine the light on this man, my father, who had a 7th grade education, who taught himself to read by reading the Bible so he could get a promotion at the flour mill, who worked 3 jobs to send 4 kids to college, who lived by one principle: son, do it right or don't do it. I am a Moss and a Pearson. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.